Close your eyes and imagine a prisoner chained and fallen onto the cold stone floor of the palace. His breath is catching, his heart is racing wildly. The only sound echoing through the corridors is his breath hitting the stone walls and the scraping of metal. A few steps away, the Pharaoh's guards are smiling as they prepare the mechanism of torture. But the real horror has yet to begin. What would you feel if you were watching this scene? One of the most ruthless and terrifying powers of the time reigned supreme, the Pharaoh. The emperor's authority was reinforced not only by a throne and gold, but also by horrific tortures. So what horrific fates awaited his enemies at the hands of this powerful figure? In ancient Egypt, power was not measured solely by wealth or military might. Obedience and fear were the pharaoh's deadliest weapons. The methods they developed to punish their enemies and those who betrayed them were so cruel that they would freeze the blood of modern humans even today. Some rituals did not just inflict physical pain, but also involved psychological torture. The pharaohs aimed to crush not only the bodies but also the souls of their victims. Among these tortures were methods so horrific that even the thought of them evoked a dark nightmare. For example, burying prisoners in hot sand. As the scorching sun beat down, their bodies slowly cooked, and their mental collapse became inevitable. Some would reach the brink of insanity within a few hours. If you ask, what is the peak of pain? This method provides an answer. Every breath is torture. Every drop of sweat is a deadly timer. The pharaoh's methods did not only target physical pain, they also destroyed the honor and social status of those subjected to them. Enemies were disgraced in the eyes of society, their families left in fear, and their stories passed down through generations as a warning. This was the economy of fear in ancient Egypt. In a sense, terror was a tool of governance. If you also love such mysteries, you will notice your heart racing as you delve deeper into the story. The grinding of chains, the metallic clang of sharp blades, and the desperate screams all echoed off the stone walls of the palace, while the last tears streaming from a prisoner's eyes reinforced the pharaoh's power. And here, just a few steps away, lie secrets untold throughout history. These secrets revealed not only those who pursued power and authority, but also the dark sides of human nature. But what was truly shocking was this. Even when punishing their enemies, the pharaohs followed a ritual. The tortures were not a chaotic display of violence. They were carried out with a planned, calculated, and terrifying harmony. Each step was designed to increase the victim's despair and leave the spectators in horror. And everyone who witnessed this moment would gasp for breath. In another room inside the palace, one of the prisoners tries to break free from his chains. His efforts are futile. The pharaoh's guards watch every stage of the torture carefully, and, when the time comes, increase the pain with a new method. The next move will break not only the enemy's body but also his mind. Imagine this moment. Silent fear, breathless anticipation. Put yourself in this prisoner's place. What would you do? And this is where the story begins. The horrific tortures inflicted by the pharaohs on their enemies were not just a method of punishment, they were a symbol of power and authority. The pain each prisoner endured was a reflection of the pharaoh's power, as well as a testament to the harsh and ruthless nature of ancient Egyptian society. If you're curious about such dark histories, the details that await you will chill you to the bone. When your eyes adjust to the darkness of the room, the atmosphere immediately envelops you. Heavy stone walls, pitch blackness, and a deathly silence hanging in the air. Prisoners trying to break free from their chains have hands and knees covered in wounds. This room was once where the pharaoh's most cruel plans were carried out. For them, the enemy was not just a human being, but a symbol, a figure of brave disobedience or betrayal, and the tortures transformed their stories into enduring legends of fear. One method used in ancient Egypt was the hot sand method. The prisoner was buried in the scorching sand on the beach, and the sun's fierce rays slowly roasted their body. Unable to move in the sand, the victims suffered both physical pain and mental collapse. Within a few hours, reaching the brink of insanity was almost inevitable. Spectators silently watched the prisoner's struggles, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. Another method was the horrific technique known as water torture. The prisoner was submerged in cold water up to their neck, making it difficult to breathe. Then the water level was slowly lowered, leaving them suspended between breathing and drowning. This method ensured that the victim was mentally broken, filled with both fear and helplessness. If you can picture this scene in your mind, you must have felt the prisoner's every breath. The pharaoh's tortures were not limited to physical pain. Social executions were also among the methods used. Enemies were humiliated in front of society. Their families, neighbors, and friends were forced to watch the horror unfold. This was a method of psychological warfare in ancient Egypt. Not only physical pain, but also shame and fear were part of the punishment. If you were in such a situation, how would you feel? Some prisoners were locked in stone rooms in the pharaoh's palace and left without food or water. This situation wore them down not only physically, but also mentally. Prisoners with no room to move for hours, days, and sometimes weeks lost track of time and slowly lost their minds. Such methods were deliberately used to break the minds of Pharaoh's enemies. Fear on one side, despair on the other, and at this very point the viewer's breath is taken away because you are faced with a reality that challenges the limits of your mind. Some historical records mention the torture throne method used during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. The prisoner was tied to a hard wooden platform and heavy stones were placed on top of them. Each stone not only crushed the prisoner's body, but also caused pain severe enough to shatter their bones. The victim's screams echoed off the stone walls of the palace, and a fearful silence enveloped the spectators. This scene instilled both horror and a sense of obedience in those who witnessed it. Ritual and symbolism also played a major role in the pharaoh's methods of punishing their enemies. Torture was not a chaotic display of violence, but a planned strategy of fear. Victims were tested not only physically, but also spiritually, as a demonstration of the pharaoh's power. Spectators watched these tortures not only with fear and curiosity, but also with respect for the pharaoh's power. It was a management strategy and at the same time, a mechanism for disciplining society. And right here, you see the tears streaming from a prisoner's eyes. His silent screams are the echo of a pain engraved in the depths of history. If you were to witness this scene, you couldn't help but empathize. Those who experience such moments never forget, and you too feel lost within this story. In the darkest corner of the palace, the rooms between the stone walls were no longer just a place of torture, but had become a theatre of death. The prisoners moved helplessly despite their chains, each breath bringing the cold breath of death. Here, the pinnacle of the methods Pharaoh used on his enemies began. Physical pain gave way to mental horror, and as the victim's spirit slowly dissolved, the silence in the room grew even more intense. Imagine a prisoner, feet chained, hands bound, scorching hot stones placed on top of him. The weight of each stone crushed his bones, and with every breath he took, he trembled with pain. But the real horror lay in the scenes presented before the victim's eyes. Pharaoh would gather his enemies' loved ones in the room and fix their helpless gazes upon the prisoner. This psychological torture was far more devastating than physical pain. As the spectators held their breath in silence, the prisoner's helplessness spread like a black cloud, filling the entire room. Another method was known as well torture. The prisoner was lowered into a narrow, deep well and left in the darkness for days. This place, where no light ever entered, caused both physical exhaustion and mental collapse. The prisoner was left alone with their own screams echoing off the walls. At this point, the viewer inevitably asks themselves, what would you do if you felt trapped in this well? This question maximizes empathy and tension. Some records mention the methods Pharaoh Ramses II used on his enemies, the slow bone breaking technique. The victim was secured on a specially designed platform. Every joint and bone was slowly crushed, broken, or shattered over time. Each stage of pain was carefully planned and administered, like a psychological experiment to gauge the victim's endurance limits. The silence filling the room would only be broken by screams drenched in fear and despair. Another peak of the Pharaoh's tortures was ritual savagery. The victim's pain was offered as part of a ritual dedicated to the gods. Torture was seen not only as punishment, but also as a sacred duty. This had both a mesmerizing and terrifying effect on the spectators. The dismemberment of the victim's body was also a reminder of divine order. Breaking the rules was rewarded with death. And it is at this very moment that the helpless screams of a prisoner fill the palace. The sounds echoing off the walls squeeze the hearts of those watching. If you find yourself wondering whether this is real or just a nightmare, know that you are looking at the dark pages of history, because these tortures were documented not only in legends, but also in real events. In another corner of the palace, there is another prisoner struggling to break free from his chains. His fighting spirit clashes with the pharaoh's ruthless display of power. Every failed attempt increases the pain. Every small act of resistance turns into a greater punishment. The viewer holds their breath as they observe this conflict, for this moment is the peak of both physical and psychological tension. At this point, the tortures send a message not only to the enemy, but also to the viewer. Power is reinforced by pain and fear. Pharaoh's enemies knew they could not break free from their chains, that their bodies and souls would be completely surrendered. And as you watch, you cannot help but be captivated by the spell of these horrific moments. This moment creates both horror and curiosity. The echoing footsteps along the stone corridors of the palace mingle with the fearful breaths of the prisoners. Each step feels like a step toward death. Each breath feels like a prisoner's last hope. The pharaoh did not content himself with inflicting only physical pain on his enemies. He also broke them psychologically. When the victim's mind was broken, their body surrendered more easily. It was precisely at this point that the terrifying ingenuity of ancient Egypt came into play. In some rituals, the prisoner was left alone in a room for hours. However, there was no silence in the room. Distant echoes of screams, the scraping of metal, and the slight vibrations of the stone floor slowly clouded the victim's mind. Amidst these sounds, combined with the helplessness brought on by loneliness, the prisoner could no longer distinguish reality from nightmare. If you were there, what would you do under this constant fear and tension? The pharaoh calculated every detail when punishing his enemies. One of the methods, called double torture, was to inflict both physical and psychological pain at the same time. The prisoner was first chained, then the first stage of torture was applied as required by the ritual. The moment the victim began to comprehend the pain, the second stage would begin. This triggered a mental breakdown with an unexpected burst of violence. This method completely destroyed the victim's resistance. Another horrific technique was exposing the prisoner to the scene of ritual stoning. The victim was punished with stones in front of the community. However, the stones not only inflicted physical pain, but also destroyed social honor. Their family and friends were forced to watch this horror. The pain experienced by the victim became a social lesson. This scene created both psychological and social fear, leaving the audience in deep tension. Some documents show that the pharaoh punished his enemies with a game of pain and hope. The prisoner was given a brief respite or a small area of relief. Then suddenly this area was removed, and the victim was thrown back into fear and pain. This method accelerated the victim's mental breakdown and created fear and curiosity in the spectators. If you were thrown back into darkness after a brief glimmer of hope, how would you feel? One of the pharaoh's most terrifying methods was to leave his enemies hungry and thirsty for long periods. This was not only physical exhaustion, but also mental torture. The prisoner, driven to the brink of madness by fear combined with hunger and thirst, knew that the next step could be death at any moment. This created both horror and curiosity for the spectators. It was a scene that pushed the limits of human nature. Although a few prisoners managed to break free from their chains in a corner of the palace, Pharaoh's guards were waiting with new methods to instantly break their resistance. Every failed escape attempt multiplied the pain and destroyed the victim's hope. This moment is the point of maximum tension for the viewer, because both the possibility of success and the danger of death are present. And at this very moment, all the suffering endured by the prisoners echoes off the stone walls of the palace as a symbol of Pharaoh's power. The audience feels not only the physical torture, but also the slow destruction of the victim's soul. Those who experience such moments never forget them, and you feel as if you have lost yourself in this dark history. The screams echoing through the palace's dark chambers now remained only as silent witnesses to the past. The prisoners' bodies were exhausted, their spirits broken. By punishing his enemies, the pharaoh demonstrated not only justice but also his power and the limitless nature of his authority. Each act of torture was not merely a scene of suffering, it was also a silent but powerful message to ancient Egyptian society. Disobedience is rewarded with fear and death. The silence of the prisoners who once writhed in chains had been engraved into the palace's stone walls. Every breath, every pain it had become part of a legend told throughout history. If you were there, watching this horror, wouldn't you question your own power and human limits? It is precisely at this point that a powerful bond is formed between the viewer and history. Because these tortures carry not only physical pain, but also a universal feeling of fear and helplessness. Most of the methods the pharaohs used on their enemies were so cruel that they would challenge even the modern mind. Hot sand, water torture, prolonged starvation and dehydration, bone breaking and ritual stoning, each was a symbol of both physical and psychological destruction. The suffering endured by the victims had a profound effect on those who witnessed it, inspiring both chilling fear and awe. These moments have been passed down through the generations as an unforgettable lesson throughout history. The power of the pharaohs was not measured only by their tortures, they were also able to psychologically control their enemies with their strategic intelligence. Every detail was planned, every step calculated to break the prisoners' minds. As the spectators realized this planned horror, they understood the full extent of the pharaoh's power. And as you watch, this dark history both frightens and fascinates you. It makes you question the limits of human beings in the face of both power and pain. At this point, imagine a scene. A prisoner tries to break free from his chain, but every move leads to even greater pain. The audience holds its breath. Hope and fear intertwine. If you were there, which path would you choose in such a moment of helplessness? The answer to this question creates a different emotional response in each viewer, and forms the most compelling part of the video. The tortures inflicted by the pharaohs on their enemies were not only punishment, they were also a historical lesson, a symbol of fear. These symbols revealed the harsh and ruthless nature of ancient Egyptian society, while also exposing the dark side of human nature. Viewers felt all the pain and fear experienced by the prisoners, forcing them to question their own empathy. And then the ending. The screams echoing off the stone walls of the palace were now silent, but history recorded their story. The horrific tortures inflicted by the pharaohs on their enemies remain one of the darkest and most striking pages in human history. If you also love such mysteries and dark histories, continue to uncover the secrets of the past. Because every story reveals the limits and power of human nature once again. And let us ask one last time, if you were there, what would you have done in these dark moments of history? Answering this question within yourself will not only help you understand the past, but also grasp the complexity of human nature. That is why the horrific tortures inflicted by the pharaohs on their enemies serve as both a warning and a profound historical lesson.